Morning everybody, welcome to another IndyCar. Today is Monday the 29th of July, so we've only got a couple more days left of July before we are breaking into the last 3 months of the existence of the United Kingdom as a European nation. And in the news today, Boris Johnson is of course to visit Scotland today amid tight security and much secrecy, but as I understand it, Boris Johnson is to fly into Scotland, and rather than flying in to meet his political friends and enemies, you might say, he's actually flying in to Faslane. As far as I understand, his first visit to Scotland is actually going to be to inspect nuclear weapons. So it's obvious that the Prime Minister's first priorities, as far as Scotland are concerned, are nothing to do with the Scots and everything to do with nuclear weapons. The information I have is that Boris is likely to be then flown by helicopter again from Faslane and possibly Coolport. As far as I know, nobody's absolutely certain of this, but he's likely to be flown by helicopter across country to Edinburgh directly to meet up first of all with Ruth Davidson, who, as you know, is not best pleased with Boris Johnson at the moment, and from there to Bute House to meet the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. In the middle of all this security and the well-reported schisms between Boris Johnson and Ruth Davidson, and the reports that the Conservative Party in Scotland is actively considering breaking away from the Conservative and Unionist Party in London and actually rebranding themselves as just the Scottish Conservative Party. At the moment, no evidence has been forthcoming from the Electoral Commission that this has actually happened. This is a story at the moment. It's unconfirmed that the Scottish Conservatives are actually considering breaking away from the British Conservative and Unionist Party. Ruth Davidson, no matter what you think of her, has always expressed her opposition to a no-deal Brexit, and it's probably the one singular piece of one singular piece of policy that Ruth Davidson has actually stuck to. The rest she has flip-flopped on like all the other Scottish Tories and just followed whichever way the wind seemed to be blowing. But on this one issue, it's interesting that Ruth still doesn't seem to want to move. It remains to be seen whether Boris can bribe her or convince her in some way to go along with the no-deal Brexit in exchange perhaps for a safe Tory seat in England. Who knows what he might offer her. When it comes to him meeting the First Minister, I think it's going to be a very different story. Nicola Sturgeon has said right from the outset that she absolutely opposes no-deal Brexit, and considering the fact that Michael Gove said yesterday and the day before that the UK is proceeding on the basis that there will be a no-deal Brexit, they're basically banking on it being a no-deal Brexit, that Boris Johnson is going to get a very frosty reception in Bute House. It's going to be interesting, I think. I'd love to be a fly on the wall to hear what is actually said in the drawing room at Bute House. What will Nicola be saying? Well, she's going to be saying what she's been saying for months, which is give us a Section 30 order so the people of Scotland can decide how they feel about your no-deal Brexit. Is Boris going to give her that? Well, of course he isn't. He's just not going to be bothered to do that. Why would he do that? So we're going to hear more of the same. More of the SNP's long game, waiting to see not so much what kind of Brexit it is, but waiting to actually see Brexit take place before holding any kind of vote of any sort at all about independence. Remember the actual mandate, which was written into the SNP manifesto when they were elected, and then was in the manifesto again, so there is another mandate for it, was that one of the conditions which would have to be met to trigger this next independence referendum was actually being taken out of the European Union without our consent. Now, we know that we haven't consented. 62% of Scots have voted not to Brexit at all, but particularly implacably opposed to no-deal Brexit. Contrast that with south of the border, where the Tories have said repeatedly in polls that they're happy to give up Scotland. They're happy even to destroy the Tory party if it means getting Brexit. They will throw anything under the bus in order to get England out of the European Union. So in this current situation, both Scotland and England are not just diverging, but they're rapidly disappearing off in opposite directions. There is no common ground really between Boris Johnson and Nicola Sturgeon. An epoxy £300 million, and not even a full £300 million, but a share of £300 million between Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland is all that Boris can offer Scots in the way of a bung or a bribe. That's not even close. In fact, it's less than a third of what he has already, his party has already given the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland, of which we have yet to see any evidence, incidentally. There's no evidence yet that that £1 billion bung, which was promised to the DUP in return for their propping up a minority Tory government. There's no evidence yet that that money is in the bank or is being spent on doing any good in Northern Ireland. But Scotland's not even to get a third of it. It's to get a third of that. And that's all we get. And Boris Johnson's first priority flying to Scotland is not to meet the Scots, not to meet the First Minister, but to go and inspect his nuclear arsenal at Faslane and to ensure that all his weapons are safe and that all of the soldiers and the seamen and all the rest of it are ready to defend that should Scotland decide to break away, because that's really what his fear is at the moment. If Scotland leaves the Union, what will happen to his precious nuclear weapons, his so-called continuously at sea deterrent? Nobody knows. Anyway, so that leads us to the second thing, which is Gavin Williamson, who until very recently was the Minister for Defence. And Gavin Williamson is widely believed to have been the man who leaked secret documents, top secret diplomatic cables, which showed that the British ambassador in Washington had a very, shall we say, low opinion of Donald Trump and his administration, basically pointing out that they were inept and incompetent and dysfunctional. And that disclosure, that breaking of the Official Secrets Act by, presumably and allegedly, by Gavin Williamson, because nobody else could really have leaked that. No civil servant would ever do it, because a civil servant would simply be jailed for treason if they did that. It had to come from the minister himself. Williamson arranged that leak to discredit the man who was the ambassador at the time, and to replace that ambassador immediately with a pro-Brexit man. Somebody who could be controlled by Boris Johnson and somebody who would be more friendly and more amenable towards Donald Trump. Having done that, and having got away with it, Williamson is now being put in charge of educating our children. A man who basically is a traitor to his own country and has committed treason is now being put in charge of the education service across the UK. Hot on the heels of Gavin Williamson's appointment as the Education Secretary, is news coming out now that the Ministry of Defence is going to increase the number of recruitment centres that it is opening in the poorest parts of the United Kingdom. So in the 5 estates, in the inner city areas where there is mass deprivation, he is going to put in army recruitment centres to entice the young people of those areas into the armed forces. There is not enough regular cannon fodder in the military at the present time. The army has shrunk in size down to less than 80,000 troops, half of which, incidentally, are part-time soldiers of the Territorial Army. They have a great need at the moment for young, impressionable men and women to join up, to volunteer, to go to the flashpoints where the UK and America are planning to start wars, and to put these young people's lives in danger. And it's a cynical move. Not only are they going to open these centres in all these deprived areas, but they're going to increase the number of school visits. So they're going to send recruitment officers into our secondary schools to try and entice our young people to join the military. You'll have seen constant adverts on the television, that because you're good at gaming, you're somehow going to be an excellent commando. All of this stuff is aimed at young people who maybe don't have hope. And if believe me, if Brexit happens, those young people won't have jobs to go to at all. And the Army or the Navy or the Air Force might be the only way out of poverty for them. The Ministry of Defence is relying on that to suck in as many of these youngsters as possible. So a very cynical ploy going on at the moment with the UK government and its Ministry of Defence to hoover up as many young people as possible into the clutches of the armed forces, so that when they do start another one of their Middle East wars, and at the moment it looks like we're on the cusp of some kind of conflict with Iran, remember that Britain and America never pick a fight with a foe who can defeat them. They always pick a fight with the country which they know they can overwhelm the defences of. And Iran would put up a very stiff fight, incidentally. They would kill a lot of people in the process. But eventually, American might, or British might, if you like, could prevail. But the problem at the moment is that the British are on their own in the Gulf. Donald Trump, capricious as ever, who got elected on the basis of bringing American service personnel home from the Gulf, can't really now say to the UK, oh, we'll send a bunch of warships to come to your aid, and they won't. So the British government has been forced to send a ship, singular ship, one destroyer, to back up the frigate that's there at the moment. But the frigate itself is going to have to be sent back home for repairs and maintenance, refitting. So we've got a ship, and we've got a defensive force in the UK which is depleted far below anything that we've seen since Napoleonic times. In fact, I looked at the numbers of ships that the Navy has now and the number of ships they had in 1982 when the Falklands War started. And in the Falklands War we had 64 ships in the fleet. 64. Now the UK has a working fleet of just under 20 vessels. 20. I mean, that's not even a banana republic. That barely is enough to patrol the coasts of the United Kingdom, never mind project force elsewhere. The 2 aircraft carriers that we have with the most expensive planes in the world, where America has provided a great deal of the equipment which goes into those aircraft carriers, these are not really British ships. These are a way of projecting American warfighting, using American airplanes, American, shall we say, American technology, missile technology, and advanced fighter jets. These are not British. These are all American inventions, all American technology, and Britain is really just carrying it on their ships. So we're in a situation at the moment where the UK is about to split asunder. The polls in the last 2 days in Wales show that support for independence in Wales has rocketed since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. Support in Wales for independence has gone up to 41%. Now that is an absolutely incredible rise. And this has been borne out in 2 polls now, that people in Wales are beginning to rise. There was a large march in Wales, as you know, on Saturday at Carnarvon, where over 8,000 people marched through the streets of the Welsh town. And not only are they going to be marching just in Carnarvon, but apparently Merthyr Tydfil is next. I would imagine that Swansea and Cardiff will be the high spot of their marching and their protest movement. But if they can get 8,000 out, for the size of the population of Wales, 8,000 people would be like the equivalent of about 125,000 people coming out onto the streets in London. That's the level of engagement that there is in Wales at the moment. So Boris Johnson comes to Scotland at a time when he knows that everything that he's doing is driving the United Kingdom apart. It's a bit like he switched the polarity in a magnet, and instead of attracting the countries together, he's now forcing them all apart. The only country which really wants to Brexit is England. It's interesting that Michel Barnier said that he congratulated Boris Johnson on being made Prime Minister of England and Wales. He didn't say Scotland, and he didn't say Northern Ireland. Very interesting comment from Michel Barnier. But we're at that stage now where Boris is going to be the man who basically takes the UK out of the European Union and causes the United Kingdom's destruction. What will be left will be an English state which runs mainly on banking, money laundering and tax avoidance, with a very tiny amount of indigenous manufacturing and a very small scale internal economy. The Scottish future is very different. If Scotland remains in Europe and stays outside of the UK, then it has its own currency, which is not going to plummet with the pound. It will have its own central banks, it will have all of its oil fields, it will have all its vast array of natural resources, including the largest offshore wind farm anywhere in the country, which can produce, at the moment, Scotland at the point of being able to produce twice as much electrical power as it can actually use. All of these things are ready to go with Scotland. There has never been a better time for Scotland to separate from England. And I don't mean just separate completely, but to come and re-establish its links with England in a different way. If England is going to leave the European Union and come up with some different way of trading with the world, that's fine for them. But Scotland needs to then leave England and then tear up the union, basically tear up the Act of Union, which no longer is fit for purpose after 300 years, and create a new treaty with England, which allows us to trade across our borders freely as we've done for centuries. And there's no reason why that couldn't be done. It just depends on whether Scotland stays in Europe itself or whether Scotland votes after independence to come up with a different trading arrangement with Europe. We might go into a free trading arrangement with Europe, which would mean we'd still be able to trade with England, we'd still be able to trade with Ireland, with Northern Ireland, and with the rest of the European Union and everybody else. All of these things are up for grabs. Boris Johnson is the catalyst for change that Scotland has needed. He is the, what would you say? Boris Johnson is the acid which is corroding the bonds which hold the country together. He talks about the ties that bind, but the ties that bind are basically being burned away by the corrosive effect of Brexit. And it's that acid that's eating through the connections that hold what's left of the United Kingdom together. The people of Wales are moving away from England now politically. The people of Scotland are absolutely moving away from England and its Brexit. Northern Ireland has been implacably opposed to Brexit from the beginning and is now tentatively looking at the south of Ireland and thinking, well, maybe we should start talking about how Northern Ireland and the Republic relate to one another. Do they want to rejoin? Do they want to reunify and form some new major Irish state? We don't know, but the point is that sticking around with England is no longer an option. Celtic nations have seen the light. Boris Johnson's coming here today for what will probably be the last visit of a UK Prime Minister to Scotland, unless it's to open negotiations for separation and a renegotiation of Scotland and England's relationship with each other. It's all coming to a head in the next few months. At the moment, I don't believe very much that you read in the press. Nicola Sturgeon is getting pelters from all sides at the moment. She's not moving. She can't move yet because the conditions of the mandate have not yet happened. We're still waiting for Boris Johnson to make Brexit inevitable. When it's absolutely inevitable and there is no turning back, that is the moment when Scotland can then vote, because at that point all of the conditions of the mandate have been fulfilled. I'll see you all later. I will be broadcasting on Scotland at 7, but not on Thursday this week. Thursday there are other things happening in Scotland that the studio is covering, so I should be presenting Scotland at 7 tomorrow evening, hopefully again with a guest. So I hope to see you again tomorrow for IndyCar, but also again in the evening. See you all later. Bye bye.